Welcome to Craft Politics, everyone. I'm Joseph Lavoie.
And I'm Andrew Percy.
And on deck this week for a cheeky half, we are drinking Strange Fella's Bellamy Old World Pilsner, which is based out of Vancouver, naturally.
Which I had to drive to 3 liquor stores because Joseph decided to decide on which beer we were having this week. And my local liquor store didn't have it. I went to another one, that didn't have it. I went to another one, and that had it. And I did text Joseph
good
to
beers
say
are
I can't
worth
find it anywhere. And at no point did Joseph say, "Oh, well, let's get a different beer." He just was like, "Okay." So I just carry on searching, despite the fact it's been snowing in Vancouver, which I had to drive out in the snow yesterday. And this is not a city that does well in snow.
Well, our listeners thank you for it, Andrew.
Well, but anyway, it's a good beer, I'm sure.
It's a good beer. How you been?
Good, yeah. I mean, it's been a bit of a mad week, right? I mean, it's like I was a bit wondering whether some of my recent choices were really sensible, given that the Canadian economy looked like it was about to be trashed by the United States.
Which it may still get. I mean,
but we've got a month's reprieve.
Yeah.
What a mad week, right? I mean, and this is sorry, but I mean, we'll get into the economic element of it. But this whole continuing to talk about making Canada a 51st state, right? We said on the previous episode that it was funny maybe when he said it the first time, then it became offensive. Now I'm just like getting really fucking pissed off with it because it's just like, shut the F up, man. Like, you can't just demand and say that, all this will go. It's so insulting, and like, in a way that Americans would never accept anybody talking about them. It would be like, "Oh, this is outrageous! How dare you?" But it's just like, no, your national identity or sovereignty, who you are as a people, doesn't matter. You're just going to become us, and it's complete. It's supremacy, right? It's a supremacist way of looking at things. The same thing with Greenland, right? I mean, it's really starting to piss me off. And I'm not even a Canadian citizen yet.
But I'm glad to see you're feeling just as pissed off about it as the rest of us.
It's crazy. I mean, it's unhinged.
It's funny. I actually got depressed. I mean, it could be that I was depressed because, as I talked about last week, I was supposed to go to Yakima and have this amazing beer weekend. And then I got extremely sick, spent 4 days in bed instead. And then
so all that exercise and snowshoeing and running.
Just none of it happened.
I have constitution of a dynasty. I don't know, whatever you have a constitution of. Nothing wrong with me. I've been eating lasagna and drinking beer every day for the last 25 years.
Fit as a fiddle, aren't you?
So, yeah, look at me, fit as a fiddle.
And anyway, but I was like, I think I'm waking up from 4 days of being in bed, and then boom, this hits, and it was just like, you can't fucking be kidding me. I mean, we knew it was coming. It's not like it was a total shock, but I think it just becomes, it just feels different once it's actually in motion.
I think nobody actually really thought. Well, I suppose they did, but I think it was still that thing of but surely he's going to do 10%. It'll be targeted. It'll be this, it'll be that. It'll be much more nuanced than this. Just, we're going to hit you with 25%. And, you've been taking the piss. And also just that, what annoys me about it is the economic argument behind it. One, the whole, surplus, blah, 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 blah. Trade surpluses are evidence of or trade deficits are evidence of an abusive relation. No, but also it's just, it's not true when you take out oil and gas, right? There is actually, I think it's broadly imbalanced, or is there actually a slight surplus for the US into Canada? So it's just not true. And that oil and gas you're getting because of decisions in this country I do not understand, you're also getting at a discount. So this is a relationship that's working in your favor. But it's just, watching somebody deploy an entirely false narrative shouldn't shock me as somebody who was in politics. But not the first time people have said things that may be questionable in truth. I did serve under Boris Johnson after all, but
what did you make of the response, the Canadian response? Because I will say, and maybe it's because I don't like getting punched in the face, that when I do get punched in the face, the most satisfying response is to punch back. In fact, punch back potentially even harder. And I was impressed that all the political actors that had to come together to respond quickly and decisively did so. And I was like, it's just so refreshing that we're able to coordinate this way, in a way that we've just not become accustomed to in Canada in a very long time.
Yeah.
And I thought going dollar for dollar. Now we're going to hear from our guest, Janice Stein, who's going to join us shortly. She's not certain about that approach, but I thought it felt very sensible, and I thought it was well executed. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was impressive in that everybody came together. The whole Team Canada thing is great. I mean, I love reading how it like got termed here as quite an aggressive response, which I thought it was actually quite mild in terms of the not the actions, but like the emotion and the thing. Like it's like a few Canadians like kind of booed the American national anthem in a kind of awkward way. And it was just very Canadian. Whereas I was thinking like the British response, I think would have been much more aggressive. I'm not saying that's a good thing. I just think like there would have been like a lot. I think the language from politicians about the American action might have been more aggressive, or maybe not, because everybody has to balance that with the fact that America is the world's hegemon, right? So, what shocked me though, what I still can't understand how Canadians are not outraged about more is this all happened. It's the biggest threat to the Canadian economy for a generation, whatever. And the parliament of this country isn't meeting.
It's still not meeting.
The point of national crisis, and it has been prorogued for the benefits, the beneficium of the Liberal Party.
Is that Latin?
Yes, it's Latin. Yeah, so I'm very cultured. I'm a lad from Hull. It's like we're always dripping.
I'm starting not to believe you're a lad from Hull.
Oh yeah, just say like comprehensive education. I'll wait till I start on the ancient Greek. But but this is the point of national crisis, and everyone's saying we need a Team Canada approach. Well, Team Canada needs to meet, and that means so you have like people representing, car workers in Southern Ontario who can't speak in Parliament about the threat that was faced to their people because the Prime Minister has decided that Parliament doesn't need to meet until the Liberal leadership race is over.
Yeah.
How are Canadians not more angry about this? I say I'm just a permanent resident, but I'm really angry about it because no one can represent me. And if you don't bring Parliament together, it's sorry, I'm ranting now, but it's the essence of democracy is the people's representatives should meet in a moment of national crisis, and they're not able to meet. I mean, it's outrageous. Yeah. End of rant.
It really is outrageous. What I wonder is if it's just as outrageous as you and I drinking beers in the middle of the afternoon. Can I read you? We're starting to get some comments trickling in.
I'm sure they'll all be invariably positive.
Let me read this out to you if it'll load. There we go. Rad Daddy 242 on YouTube writes, I like how if you're a middle-class person sipping a 7% craft beer in the afternoon while discussing its lineage and undertones, it's all perfectly acceptable, but swap that for a can of Kestrel or Steve Reserve and a park bench, then suddenly you're a blight on society.
Well, first of all, thank you for calling me middle class because I've never been called that.
I was going to say.
I'm like a lad from Hull, from
who speaks Latin,
terrible comprehensive school. So I don't think I've ever been called middle class. So I'm pleased to say that I've now ascended to middle classdom. So that's nice. And I don't think I've ever called anybody out for drinking a can of Kestrel on a park bench.
Yeah, neither would I.
I think as long as you're not engaging in antisocial behaviour. I have regularly drank beer in parks in the UK because it's not illegal.
I was going to say, if I wish I could drink beer on a park bench more often.
There are some beaches at some times where you can do it at certain points in the year in Vancouver now because that's freedom.
That's freedom.
But well, Rad Dad is obviously just jealous he's not drinking. I mean, it's not like we're downing cans. We're having a little sip, tasting
a little sip.
And you know what?
Notes. Speaking of,
maybe we'll do a can of Kestrel one day then.
Yeah, maybe we should. If
we'll make Kestrel,
get our hands on it.
But anyway,
when we're in the UK next.
Yeah, we'll do Kestrel.
Okay, we're going to cut shortly to our interview with Janice Stein, who we're delighted to have on the show. She certainly gives Andrew and I a lot to think about. She brings a different perspective on some of this tariff stuff and international relations compared to what we bring. So excited to bring that to you. We'll close this out before we go to the interview. A quick tasting note on this strange fella's Bellamy Old World Pilsner. What do you think of it?
I think it's delicious. It's so crisp. I mean, it's nice. I think it's nicely malty, right? It's nicely balanced. And it's just really, I do find with a lot of pilsners that people try and do craft pilsners, they often make them a little bit too thick for me, if that makes sense to you. Whereas this is just like, it's the right amount of, I think it's the maltiness, right? It's just kind of
maltiness. And I find I think it's one of the best pilsners, if not the best pilsner in all of British Columbia. And what makes it delightful is it's a German style pilsner. So it's got more of that floral herbaceousness in the hops, which I want those old world herbaceous hops. But you're right, it does not hide the malt profile, which is absolutely critical to a good Pilsner. So this thing is, I
But
find this
not
thing
to
is good.
overpower it. That's the key thing, right?
Not overpowering. And I think it's good all year round. I mean, this thing is obviously very refreshing on a hot summer's day.
On a park bench.
On on a park bench. And it's just as good in the winter.
But also, you do resemble that after this week, right? The
Yes.
image on this can.
That is why we chose it. Ultimately, we thought this is what most Canadians are feeling and looking like after
A fairly crazy few days.
after a couple of days on tariffs. And we may still look even worse off because I'm not convinced that in 30 days we're skating past this. I think it's like, oh, Canada freaked out on this and I got this one concession, then I'll just threaten another round of tariffs on this other issue and then just keep Canada on its toes. And I think this may be...
The only thing that makes me more hopeful on that is that the response from a lot of business groups in the US was fairly damning,
right?
To speak out against Trump, given him, his memory on stuff, is quite something to do at the moment. But quite a lot of them came out quite negative. What I was also surprised about here, actually, which was there were organizations like, was it Shopify, who came out and the chief exec or founder, I can't remember which one, saying actually, this is, there's reason for this, and and also
he didn't think it made sense for Canada to respond for tat.
And there was there was a debate around that, I guess, and we'll get into this, I'm sure, with Janice more, but about what is the right, as you say, like. Yeah. I was surprised at a bit of the debate, but generally it was a fairly united response, right?
All right. Well, we'll have a lot to still talk about next week. We will cut now to our conversation with Janice Stein, and we'll talk next week.
Cheers.
Cheers. Janice Stein is with us today, and I'm so happy about it because Janice, I grew up when I was a nerd watching Janice explain the Middle East to me on national television.
When you were a nerd, you're still a nerd, Joseph. I'm no past tense about it, but anyway, continue.
This is the nerdy discussion, right?
Yes, it is.
Nerdy discussion. Okay.
Because we're going to get into tariffs in just a second. But Janice is the founding director at the Munk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy. She is renowned and internationally respected as one of Canada's foremost experts on world politics and the author of countless books. And I think the perfect guest for us to have today to talk about tariffs. So Janice, welcome to the show. Where do we find you today?
You find me actually in Washington, D.C., the epicenter of the storm. And a delight to be with you.
Awesome. So can you start us off with, and maybe none of us has the answer to this, but the best that you can explain this to us, what the hell just happened?
Oh, wow. I don't think anybody really knows the answer. Let me try in just 2 or 3 non-nerdy sentences to summarize this. This president came to office with a long-standing and very positive view of tariffs. So not a big surprise that something was going to happen at all. And then proceeds to put 25% tariffs, to threaten to do it, on his 2 closest neighbors, Mexico and Canada. And China gets most favored nation treatment, 10% tariffs. It is almost impossible to tell a coherent story about this. In what world do you come down like a ton of bricks on your closest neighbors and give China better treatment? It is impossible for listeners outside of Canada. It is impossible to overestimate the shock, the anger, the disappointment, and the resolve in the Canadian public. This is one of these generational events.
That explains it in very, very clear manner, Janice. But I'm wondering if you think, well, on a scale of insanity, if this was just 1 was just business as usual and 100 is whole next level insane. What makes this so insane? To me, what makes it insane is the fact that it is the nature of the trading relationship. And normally, before you get to a point of escalating to such crazy levels of tariffs, there would be some kind of escalation. And sure, some would say Trump telegraphed where his views are on some of this stuff. And we know that he's coming in second term with a great more level of energy and focus than he did in that first term. And so maybe none of us should be surprised by this. But I mean, to me, in the world of international relations, there's a usual playbook, right? You go, if this doesn't work, then you ask some of your team members to meet for weeks at a time. You get that sorted out, and there's like an incremental move into something like this. How insane is this?
On that scale that you gave me, 1 to 100, this is 98.
Right.
It is way up the escalation ladder. The timelines were Tuesday. It became clear on a Friday. The timeline was Tuesday, 3 days later. No time for real discussion. And let's remember that the North American economy is an integrated economy. It has been deepening this integration for 30 years. We have some of the most deeply interconnected supply chains. And one of the interesting sidebar conversations over the last few days was, how are they going to calculate the tariffs? Systems aren't in place to do it, because when a part for a car crosses the border back and forth 8 times, do you impose a tariff 8 times and you get a 200% tariff from the original? So in fact, the machinery to do this isn't there for some really, really tightly integrated supply chains. And we have a framework agreement which is up for renew and not that long ahead, next year. But he could not wait. And so he used a spurious. I mean, anybody who believes that Canada is a national security threat to the United States hasn't been paying a lot of attention to Europe and Asia lately.
Okay, so begs the question. Everybody agrees that it's a bit mad. It doesn't make any sense. Although as you say, he telegraphed a lot of this. This is the essence of Trumpism, right? The will he, won't he, keep them guessing. This is the new political philosophy, right? And I was thinking about this over the weekend. Businesses and individuals have to align to whatever the ideology of any government is. Well, they're going to have to align now to this. It could be this or it could be that, right? Let's keep them guessing. But I suppose my question is, given that we all agree that it was all mad, why? Why do you think he's done it?
So there are, first of all, Andrew, nobody knows. I'm not even sure Donald Trump knows. Okay. So, right. And that's what the conversation is all about. But there are 2 or 3 possible reasons here. One, he actually needs revenue, which people are not paying attention to. He needs revenue because he has to refinance his tax cuts. He does not want those tax cuts to lapse. They were a signature piece of his first administration. And even the Republican members of Congress are saying, hey, we can't do this because spending has reached such a level that without alternative sources of revenue, we're not going to approve a budget that renews the tax cut. There's a short-term push on him. I think people are not paying quite enough attention to that. These are revenue generators. They end up in the U.S. Treasury, regardless of the bigger logic. A second argument is a different one, and it's how he views the global trading system in the North American one. The United States got taken advantage of. I could use a 4-letter word, but I won't. Okay. And that runs through all his conversations. And you hear not fair, we're not going to let that go on, this is over. That laces his speeches. So how do you do this? There are people who have a longer term view. You impose tariffs. Yeah, there's short term pain, but precisely what you said happens. People shift production to the United States to get behind that tariff wall. Foreign investment goes to the United States because you're not going to have to worry about all of these. And you're already seeing some of that in Canada. Big, and it's particularly manufacturing sector that's very vulnerable. It's not resources, but it is a manufacturing. And so what happens then? The American economy starts to grow. Jobs come back to the United States, or so the story goes. And yes, there's inflation. Yes, people don't like that. but that'll get balanced out over time if we can only stay the course. So this week was very interesting for that. When the markets opened on Monday and they were down, and Detroit businesses said, do you realize we're going to shut down in 3 weeks at the most if this keeps going on? It's not what we said to them, I could tell you. No, he all of a sudden said he got spooked. It wasn't clear that he was all in for this game. And
right.
Short-term pain.
Right. The win is became suddenly less obvious. I find that interesting because I do want to come back to our response because Janice, you did have a perspective on whether it was the appropriate one if I picked up on one of the podcasts you did on the weekend. But first, it looked like Andrew wanted to pipe in.
Can we also just continue in this why? I think it's really important we come to the Canadian response. But on the why, the second why is why does he care if he's not running for re-election? Okay, so if it's just around, because if his actions are going to put up the cost for American consumers, that's not a record you want to go out of office on. But similarly, I understand why you might want to go out of office on a record of delivering more jobs and economic growth, and as you've just outlined. But the offset of that is you go out as the guy who had inflation going up and had prices going up, which is the very thing he accused the Biden administration of, and he's not running. So that's the second why. Why? What's in it for him?
So there's two answers to your question, Andrew. This is not just politics. This is a movement in his view, and he has heirs to the movement who are going to continue the revolution. And if you think about it that way, it's easier to answer the why.
Yeah.
The more cynical and the darker view is it's not entirely clear that he doesn't want to stay in office.
Yeah. Well, yes. Yeah.
Yes. Right. And who knows again, but he has made one or two offhand remarks like that. So either of those two would explain why.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, to the extent we'll ever figure that one out. I think he's just such a transactional human being. We talked about this, I think, a couple of weeks ago on the show, Andrew and I, that he's fine to change course so long as he feels he got a good end of the deal.
He's got to win out of it.
He's got to win out of it.
It's a narcissistic personality, right? He has to be right.
Yeah. We can come back to whether we think he actually got a win on this. But first, I want, Janice, I'd love for you to share with Andrew your perspective on Canada's response, because for the most part, it seems like there's been a rallying around the flag moment. Most people, at least most of the commentary, agreeing that Canada's approach was the right one. Go dollar for dollar, smack him in the face with exactly what he gave us. This is what he responds to, and then we'll take it from there. And I was so caught off guard by your perspective that you thought actually that might not be the appropriate response. So I'd like for you to explain to us what your perspective is on that.
I will say honestly, I'm one of a tiny minority who doesn't like the slogan dollar for dollar and doesn't think that's the underlying approach with this president. Why don't I like dollar for dollar? Because they are 10 times our size. And in any dollar for dollar competition, we will lose over time. There's no ambiguity about this. There's no guessing. And I, as a rule, try not to fight on a battlefield where I know I'm going to lose in advance. I never would have used that language. It did start, and I think it's just a strategic mistake, and it's an own goal, even to frame the conflict that way. Secondly, we've all said he needs a win. He needs to win. So, and at this point is moot. We don't have a good test of it. It'll come up again, though, in 3.5 weeks. Gloria Sheinbaum came out, didn't commit to specifics, said she was going to impose retaliatory tariffs, but said she was open for a phone call, and she was going to announce those tariffs later on, right? Interesting, the first phone call was to her, not to our prime minister. We went out of the gate with the tariffs in that dollar-to-dollar framework. And when you're dealing with a head of a country who's 9 times bigger than you are, whom you need much more than they need you, because we need to export to the U.S. market, the Americans don't really need to export to us. in anything like the same order of magnitude, their trade is a much lower proportion of their gross domestic product. So we're at a double disadvantage here. Your whole goal has to be don't humiliate them. Don't give them the win. Yes, you have to show resolve, but you do it in a quieter, more self-disciplined way. Now, by the end of the day, Monday, Mexico and Canada found themselves in the identical position, even though they responded differently. And China, that did and took 48 hours also to announce tariffs, and also has sued the United States and WTO. That'll take 10 years. My grandchildren will figure out what the end of that is. Did not get that call. But for us, the goal has to be, for Canada, the goal has to be, don't say something, don't do anything which will infuriate him. He remembers every nasty comment that people make about him. He holds a
not
grudge.
JD Vance, apparently. He's let those go.
JD Vance got a pass, you're right, Andrew. But nobody else does. And I think this is going to be very tough. He loves uncertainty. He loves chaos.
It's his philosophy. It's his political philosophy, right?
Yes.
This is his ideology.
Exactly. It's not going to end on March the 1st. It's not going to end on April. As somebody tweeted out, he's been in office 17 days and we have another 14.
Is that all? Is that all? Oh my gosh.
So this is going to be, an incredibly demanding task for a conservative prime minister, a liberal prime minister. It doesn't matter who you are. You can't give in. Think how hard, and Joseph, I bet you will agree with me in a minute. Think how hard it is for the next prime minister to distance themselves from this wave of Canadian nationalist sentiment and not to ride it.
Right.
But that's what they have to do.
So, it goes against, obviously you have people have an emotional reaction when you're being bullied, but also, the advice, you give when you're a kid is if a bully punches you, punch him back or her back, because that generally means that they then back down, right? This is the conventional playground politics, and it feels like we're into playground politics. So to urge, to resist that urge to do that is really difficult.
So hard. And, I'll tell you where that analogy doesn't totally fit. And although I think he's a bully, there's no question about that. He's a bully. But this is a bully we need. Right. Sometimes bully in the schoolyard, you punch him back and you move right on. And the other guys watching become your friends, right?
Right.
That's why you give that advice. In this particular case, there's a big discussion in Canada going on right now, but we need to diversify our trade. Yeah, we've been trying since the 1970s and we failed. Europe trades with Europe, and you know that better than anybody else because Britain is looking in and wants back in all but name. Inter-Asian trade has grown enormously. We're North American, right? We have to find a way to live with this. And this is going to sound terrible to Canadians, what I'm going to say right now. We have to find a way to live with this bully.
I did. I wrote about that on the LinkedIn blog this week, saying that this whole idea of diversification. Yes, you should always look for new markets, but it's much easier said than done. Sorry. The UK was I actually wrote about this as well because actually I want to ask you about this because the UK was in a slightly different position with the European Union in that it, even when it was a member, traded more outside of the EU than with the EU, which was unusual. That's not the case here, right? When your economy is 80% reliant on the guy next door, who's a lot, 10 times bigger, behaviors are going to have to, account for that. So, and it's funny, we've seen this, I don't know whether, obviously the next target of Trump's tariffs are going to be the European Union. And I don't remember but he said possibly the UK, but the UK isn't as bad. And he's had very nice phone calls with Keir Starmer, which I think is really interesting, right? It's like, and it all goes back to this, like, because Keir Starmer's been nice to him, then the UK might be in a different position. And we might not do that.
And he likes the king. He likes
the king. Yeah, he loves the royalty. He loves the UK and all the rest of it. But I was just saying, like, and I don't know, it's now causing some difficulties because I don't know whether you saw in the last 24 hours, the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer has said he won't choose between the EU and the US because the US is the UK's single biggest trading partner. The EU collectively is 40 odd % of UK trade. I suppose my question is, what's the advice now? So if his next target is the European Union and possibly the UK, depending on how nice Keir Starmer is or isn't to him, how should given that the European Union's economy and the US economy is much more evenly matched, they rely on each other much less, what would your advice be on how the EU responds? Should it take the Canada approach of not punching back, or is it in a different position?
Yeah, it is harder for Keir Starmer because it's so clear without his saying so that he regrets Brexit. And understands that Britain has paid a big price for Brexit and is looking for new ways. And you see it because he's an active participant in the defense conversations that the
I mean,
EU is having.
I might disagree, Janet, as a Brexiteer, because actually our economy has outpaced the European Union since we left. But anyway, we'll not get into the Brexit arguments because that took 5 years of my political life. But Keir Starmer is was the arch Remainer, right? He was, people's vote, second vote, all the rest of it. Keep voting until you get the answer you want kind of guy. But clearly that's his position.
But then he has said he does regret, and he's looking for a way back in. Whether he's right or wrong, that's where he is, I think.
Well, not in, I think. It's more, he said, because what they've laid out is closer alignment on some things. But actually, weirdly, the briefing from Number 10 over the weekend was they want to retain, but nothing that challenges the Brexit freedoms they've got, which is an interesting way of how you square that circle. I don't know. But anyway, I'm just interested in how the EU should respond.
So what I heard when I saw this over the weekend was, I want to have it all. Right? I'm going to trade the United States. I'm going to trade the European Union. They're all good partners. And really, guys, wouldn't it be nice if you all got along? Trump there's a short life to that, frankly. Because that's part of Trump's strategy, is to sow this chaos and confusion and to force people into a situation where they have to make decisions. There's one world, and somebody was asking me about this just this morning. Well, what if the European Union and the UK and Canada, we all got our act together and really collectively pushed back against the United States? The problem is everybody's incentive to do that is not as great as ours.
Yes. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, we have the most skin in the game.
The most to lose, the most skin in the game. And Europeans are genuine, and in some ways, Keir Starmer's genuinely conflicted, but so are the Europeans, because the Europeans are so worried about Russia. They are, if you spend time in Europe, you hear it over and over. They're so worried about Russia. They are so worried that if Ukraine falters, they are next on the list. Yep. That the cost of fighting with him is really great for people who have that concern. So if you're a Canadian, I think waiting for your allies to stand up for you, there was deafening silence Friday.
Yeah. It is.
Monday.
It's so true.
From our NATO allies, right?
Yeah.
Not one spoke out in favor.
That's a really interesting perspective, actually, because you think, Canada, because of the, 80% of the Canadian economy reliant on the US, isn't able to punch back economically. You think with the EU, an economy of a similar size to the US, much less reliant on the US, it is. But of course, security-wise, absolutely is in a great, much more weaker position than Canada is on the security front vis-a-vis the US. And so, it's actually, so the European response is going to have to not be yes, it could punch back, dollar for dollar, euro for euro economically, but that whole security, because there is this real fear, right? Ukraine, the front seems to be weakening. There's, governments being elected actually within the European Union now who are openly advocating for the end of that conflict, for a detente even with Russia. So the United States European security relies on the United States, right?
Yeah.
So I hadn't really thought about in terms of the security weakness,
right,
tempering how the EU could respond.
And this is part of the advantage that Canada's always enjoyed. We're not worried about our security. And we've had a free ride in many ways. That's why
such a free ride.
And that's why our defense spending is so abysmally low, frankly. Because if there were any threat against North America, it's obvious what will happen here, right? Now
Yeah.
we need to.
Uncle Donald, can you please help us?
That's
I don't think you'll need to call. He'll just make the call himself, right?
Yeah.
I don't think you'll even
Right.
know. We'll just see the jets flying over, and we'll
Yeah.
know, right?
exactly,
I
exactly.
do. I'm slightly embarrassed that I feel I didn't pick up on the clue he gave us during the election campaign, which was he kept saying tariffs are the most lovely word. It's my favorite word, all the time, and I thought that meant he'll just use it soon, certainly shortly after he's elected, to get a couple wins out of us, China, whatever. But the fact that he's already talking about the rest of the world, like it now has me thinking he's just going to use tariffs as a weapon, as an economic weapon, like any single time he wants to get something done. Holy crap, look how quickly Canada and Mexico called me up wanting to bring,
Yep.
security to the border, blah, 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 blah. So fine, I got a problem with UK. I'm just going to throw out the word tariff and watch them react. So I wonder, Janice, if he is, I mean, you've written so many books on international relations. And I have to imagine there was a time when you wrote these books where there was a sort of framework, there was sort of a way things were done. Is he changing the art of diplomacy, or is it just
So,
purely him?
first of all, I completely agree with you, Joseph. This is economic warfare. That's what it is, right? The United States declared economic war on Canada and Mexico. to to give this explanation, the exclamation point that it really needs. Look, I think the famous liberal rules-based international order, which we relied on because it was great for us because we're small. It always these kinds of rules-based orders are always great for small countries. Died in about 2000. I think the funeral was 2016. It had started to die before. But we have a political class in this country that is deeply committed to it. I understand why you're motivated to be committed to it because it really works very, very well for you, but it's dead. We just haven't had the funeral. So is he breaking the rules? The rules were gone anyway.
Right.
And I wasn't surprised. And look, I'm going to say something again, which I hope you're going to be outraged by, Andrew. If this moves as it may to a global tariff, that is a better world for Canada than the world we were in for those 4 days.
Mm.
The worst economic world for us is tariffs that are disproportionately focused on Canada and Mexico, because then you rip apart the only region that we have.
Right.
And we don't fare well as small countries in a world of regions. If in fact, and there's some grounds to think this is where this might end up, who knows, there's a 10% global tariff on everything coming into the United States. What does that do? It gives him the revenue that he needs, but it allows everybody to adjust with less trauma. To a world in which protection is an economic weapon that the very powerful use against the smaller ones.
This nonsense that a country can only, an economic relationship is only good if you're in surplus to that country is obviously just, illogical.
It's bonkers.
So where does that end? And I suppose my other question was, is he a genius? Maybe this was all planned. He got what he wanted. So is there a genius here? Are we missing something? He got what he wanted out of Canada on fentanyl and the board and stuff like that. So is this all a genius we're not seeing?
Well, I don't think that can be what he wanted. Right. Because the damage he did to the relationship with the two neighbors so great to get that. He could have just asked for it, Andrew. He would have, right? And maybe he would have had it twice, but no more, and could have gotten it. I think there's a bigger issue here, which is part of the way I think about the world now. We're moving into an increasingly jobless economy. Advanced technology is taking us there. That is one of the most dislocating social revolutions that you can have because people value their jobs. Even if there were some such magical thing as a guaranteed annual income, which no country can really afford at this point, what you hear back from people, no, I want to work. There was a dignity in work. And many of the Trump voters in the United States have been, not all, but many have been economically dislocated. I mean, the Rust Belt phenomenon in the United States is not new, but we're going to see whole parts of the world economy rusted out over the next 20 years. And I think that's the challenge. We have to think about how our societies fare, how we give people meaningful roles when it's no longer through work that your identity is not wrapped up wholly in your work.
I said on the show a couple of weeks ago that I feel like if anyone who read Hillbilly Elegy, and that book came out ages ago, not because it was written by J.D. Vance, but because it tells a story of these people. And until their story is resolved, and it has not been resolved yet, then this is what we're dealing with.
Correct. I mean, the J.D. Vance that we hear today is not the J.D. Vance who wrote that book. That book was a superb book, right? Because it told the story of people who totally dislocated, felt totally unheard, undervalued. That was a big story in Britain. It is a huge story in the United States, and it's a big story in Canada.
Yeah. You're right.
Who you are is what you did, right? You'd hear it. I represented the Rust Belt, and you'd hear, we're a fishing family, we're a steel family.
Correct.
Like this is, you're reminding, this is who you are. Your entire identity is wrapped up in that, and it's gone. And but you see it in other parts of the world, so you then become resentful of why, if they still have it in China, don't we have it here, right?
Right. So if you actually think about what Donald Trump is trying to do, if we put the best possible face on him, okay, if we try to be as magnanimous as we can to him, he's trying to bring manufacturing jobs back to the United States.
Laudable.
It's not about fentanyl. It's not about border security. It is about trying to recreate an economy that, frankly, that manufacturing economy, this is the missing piece in the whole story, that economy wasn't destroyed by trade. That was a small part. Trade to China, yes, but very time limit. This is destroyed by technology.
Yes, yeah.
And nobody's been able to make him believe that story yet. And Elon Musk is not about to try.
Yeah, it's this thing that globalization has killed all these. Somebody posted that on one of my things I put up recently, saying, globalization has killed all these jobs in a particular part in the UK. I was like, no, it hasn't. It's given us all access to stuff that we would never have had access to. But actually, as you say, it's technologies, other factors that have is the reason why we don't send thousands and thousands of people down mines in the way we used to, or into factories the way we used to, because hands have been replaced, right? It's just terribly sad and awful. But they haven't. But then replaced. But then the people may have been replaced, but who they were hasn't. So no, it's interesting.
So that's the genius. That if there is genius, he's hearing these people, and he's giving voice to them.
Well, Janice, you gave us so much to think about. Absolutely. We're so appreciative, and
so much fun to be with the two of you. And let's do it again.
Let's do it again. Absolutely, we'll take you up on that.
But with some craft beer. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to send you the beer next time.
We'll have to send you the beer.
Drink the beer with us. So.
Bye, folks.
Awesome. Thanks,
Bye, Janice.
Bye.